Good morning, and thanks for joining us here on Condo Solutions. Monday mornings, 9 to 10 o'clock. We talk about things that affect you and your condominium or homeowners association, some of the issues that you may have to deal with. It is a call-in show. 220-9788, 220-WSTU is the number in the studio. If you want to call with a question, we'll be happy to get you on the air and answer the question. Couple things when you call in, we do need a name, but we don't need an association. So that's the first criteria. And the second thing is that we don't have your documents. And so we can't give you a hard and fast rule or a hard and fast answer without your documents, because in many cases, the documents can change the answer. So for that reason, we give you the best answer we can based on current law and statutes, and based on the fact that your interpretation of your own documents and things like that, which we understand can be conflicting and confusing. So we will give you the best, but if you need an answer that you're going to go to court with, like we always tell you, you should contact your own attorney, someone who specializes in this area, and let them look at your documents and do some research for you, and try to get you the best answer they can based on that. Then that way you'll have a better understanding of what you're facing if you're heading into legal combat. But otherwise, we're here to help, and that's our goal. We've been here for about 17 years doing this. My name is Mark Breckbill. I'm a CPA and a community association manager. And along with me is Peter Mullengarden. Peter is our attorney. He has been practicing in this area for 35 or 40 years, somewhere in that range, almost all of which has been with associations, representing associations, not developers. But he did do some of that. We call it being on the dark side. He did serve the dark side early in his career, but he has seen the light, and he has now joined the force and is on the good side here. So for those of you that don't like those references to Star Wars, too bad. But anyway, because he's been doing it about as long as Star Wars was in existence. I think Star Wars came out, Peter, right when you started, didn't it? Is something like that? Isn't that pretty much? You probably about the same time as me, just about the time that the first Star Wars. Yeah, right. Yeah. So
I saw the first movie when I was a senior in high school.
Okay. See,
1977.
Yeah. See, that was a ways ago. I was already trying to earn a living at that point in time, but not doing a good job of it. No, I was doing a good job of it. Got out of college, working in Chicago. All right, we have our first question, first caller today. Barbara, go ahead, Barbara.
Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Morning.
I wasn't sure if you were going to be on because when I went to the site, it said Condo Solutions-October 14th, and I immediately had a heart attack. So here's the situation. We're having our first board meeting tomorrow since March. And in that time, I'm sure, of course, you're going to remember everything that I said. And you know that within the last month, we took out another annuity done on the basis of phone calls, not everybody being told. And I had begged for a board meeting so we could discuss this. So tomorrow, here's what I'm up against. Number one, Mark, last week you referenced insurance companies trying to get the legislature to allow annuities. And for me to bring that up, I need to have some kind of documentation as to when that occurred and if I can find that, because it's too broad a Google search. I need something more specific. Can you help me with that? And then if you can't, then I have a second question that follows on that.
Yeah, I was trying to, in fact, that's the reason I was running a little late this morning, but I haven't had a chance to look it up to see the specific language out of the administrative code or and in the statute in terms of what the restrictions are there. With October 15th coming up, most of our condo people are busy now trying to get some of the final corporate returns out. So I haven't had a chance to talk to a couple people relative to the proposed legislation, but I'll get back with you because I've got your information. I'll get back with you on the actual language in there that I'm referring to or that we're referring to. But I haven't been able to get that yet. I just didn't have time.
Okay. All right. So then that moves us up to number two. in tomorrow's meeting, they're going to, quote, ratify the purchase that they've already made. And what I would like to propose to them is I would like to have make a motion that we get a written legal opinion from our lawyer. And I know for a fact, because the lawyer told me, that she had not seen a copy of the annuity and didn't have one.
Okay.
And so my question is, if I go forward with this and try to get a motion to have a written legal opinion by our lawyer regarding the purchase of both of these annuities, based on the fact that our bylaws strictly say the funds of the corporation will be deposited in a bank in St. Lucie County, period. Well, what is the likelihood of getting a legal opinion that says that those annuities are okay?
Well, my feeling was, and I'll let Peter, because he's an attorney, but my feeling would be that I don't see, based on your documents and also, based on the general statute, I just don't see that they could give you an opinion saying that those were allowed. Peter, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty unlikely to get that opinion.
Yeah, I mean,
I can't speak for another lawyer, attorney, but it sounds like the documents pretty much speak for themselves. And if the documents say how the funds are supposed to be deposited and kept, then that's how the funds are supposed to be deposited and kept. I mean, there's not a lot of wiggle room there.
I mean, if the documents had other language in it that allowed for a broader interpretation, I mean, a broader investment program, then I'd say, well, maybe they might take precedent over the law in terms of some of the restrictions that the state puts on. But usually in the investment area, it doesn't. Those restrictions are usually, they'll override a lot of the, if the state is more strict, they will technically override, your own statutes or your own documents if they're more strict in that area. But because the state is trying to rein in that type of activity in general, it's over the years been a problem. People haven't, they put investments out in areas where they don't belong and they lose money, and and then when they need the money, it's not there. So,
although in this instance, just as a procedural matter, I mean, unless that motion gets a second and gets passed, and obviously this is a board meeting, right? So only motions can come from board members, not from the floor. Theoretically, they could just vote not to seek that opinion. The board, which in case you'd be left, I think, with sending a written inquiry by certified mail asking for a substantive response. Probably the next best thing. Short of.
Well, my thought is that if the motion doesn't pass, that is significant and it says something, and it can be. I know legally it can't necessarily be represent anything, but I would assume that from the point of view of transparency, it would certainly say something about the board's willingness to actually take a look at what they've done.
Yeah.
No, I understand.
And and depending upon what kind of support you've got, for a second, so that you can get it to a vote, I would make your motion fairly specific. In other words, whereas our documents specifically say and use the exact language, and whereas an annuity is uninsured and represents an uninsured investment of association money, and whereas the duties of the board are to protect and preserve the assets of the corporation, therefore, therefore we recommend that the board, or we ask that the board have their attorney um, specifically address this investment, and do it something like that so that you get the language in there a little bit, because this motion could be argued about. Somebody can say, well, we didn't know that that was the case, or nobody knew. I wasn't, So when you start quoting some language out of your documents and, some general provisions that the state looks at, it makes it look a lot worse when they vote it down.
Yeah, yes. And I hear what you're saying. Uh, One of the criticisms that, and rightfully so, that is leveled at me is that I'm too detailed a person and that I lose a lot of people in the first 10 seconds. So, I'm just sitting here trying to figure out how I balance that.
Well, you're going to get opposition. That's going to get probably going to get voted down because you don't have enough votes on the board. So,
right, that's correct.
So
make the point then. Okay.
At this point,
okay.
I think it's important. I mean, Peter's opinion is, I'd ask for Peter's opinion too, but my opinion is that at this point, you're really just posturing yourself for further action because they're not going to approve it. But, and all you're doing is just making it very clear as to why, you're asking for the opinion. Because it appears to be in violation with law and common practice.
Okay.
Peter, what's your thought on that? Do you think you just keep it simple, or put something in the motion?
No, you can keep it simple and put something in the motion. I mean, you can do both. I mean, you just have to be fairly succinct. You would say, and I mean, you don't have to make it, go on and on. You would say, article blank, section blank of our bylaws provides money must be deposited in a depository located in St. Lucie County. It has been reported, that we had this annuity. Therefore, I'm making a motion that we seek an opinion from our counsel as to whether this annuity is proper under our documents and Florida law. There, it's pretty short.
Yep, good deal.
Okay.
It doesn't have to go on. Don't give a whole history about, Billy shot Sue and Sue shot Teddy and this person. Just keep it right to the point of the documents. Don't go into a history about this person and that person and the board did this 2 years ago and 3 years ago. Don't go all into that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sarah, the last board meeting, one of the board members that is a few of us that are trying to hopefully make some changes. He did quote it in the comment time that he was allowed. He did quote that section and asked how it was that we had these investments, and the answer that we got, which is recorded, was that the board approved it, and then that was the end of that. So. That may also be an answer, but that's okay. It's what's been typically done. They also, what they're trying to do, and this very same person involved in purchasing of the annuity, is also trying to make policy changes regarding comments by board members, and access to association records. And so I would think that anything that they propose cannot be outside of what is allowed under 718. Am I correct in assuming that?
What do you mean?
Well, because people have been trying to request documents that they want to see regarding investments and stuff like that, the treasurer is now proposed he wants to change policy for certain things, including comments that we make and access to association records. And I would think that he can't do anything that limits the scope of that any more than what 718 does. Am I correct in that?
Well, yes. I mean, basically, 718. Chapter 17 of Florida statutes provides that, which is the Florida Condominium Act, provides that any owner or or their representative is entitled to access to the association's official records and has time frames by which the association must produce those records or make them accessible after receipt. It's within 10 business days after receipt of a written request. Now, the association through the board can adopt reasonable rules and regulations regarding the manner, scope, frequency of record inspections, but those rules have to be reasonable and obviously are subject to the provisions of the statute. So, they could limit reasonably how frequently someone can request records. They can reasonably limit, the length of each record inspection session. Perhaps limit the scope of, you can't ask for all the records going, 50 years back to be provided at, at one time. So again, reasonable rules, but subject to the parameters of the statute.
Okay. Regarding the statute, one of the things that I've heard is that our documents were written before 718. Therefore,
they were probably written during Chapter 711, which was the predecessor of 718. Okay, you cannot have a condominium without a condominium statute. It's impossible. So they were probably written under again, up until, I forget the exact years.
72, wasn't it?
Might have been after that, but it was 711 was changed to 718, but that was the first condominium act.
All right. So
I think it was after 72, Mark.
Okay.
It had to be after 72 because our documents were written in 74.
Yeah, I think it was in the late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
All right. But my question would be, as a result of, and we will be hopefully doing new documents, but as a result of the change from 711 to 718, which takes precedence?
What do you mean? I mean, one statute leads into the other. I mean, generally speaking, it depends on the issue, as far as, is it your documents versus the Condominium Act?
Okay.
As Mark mentioned a few minutes ago, generally speaking, the statute will control. However, the documents can typically be more restrictive, but not less restrictive than what the statute provides. It depends upon the issues too, whether it's a substantive issue or a procedural issue. And then it also depends upon whether your documents have something called Kaufman language, which is, are they subject to the Condominium Act as amended from time to time or not? We can go on for a long time on this topic because there are entire seminars just on this one issue. But kind of briefly, typically substantive changes to the law, things affecting people's vested rights, do not apply retroactively unless the documents have what's known as this Kaufman language, incorporating amendments of the act into the documents. Procedural matters, things like meeting notices and stuff like that, election procedures, that kind of stuff. The procedural issues generally do apply, notwithstanding what your documents say. And that's a very broad brush, relatively quick response. So, a crappy lawyer answer that Mark says that I never give, but I do occasionally, is that it kind of depends, again, on the issue, but you simply can't say that the statute does not apply. I mean, that's absolutely wrong. Statute does apply. You have to go kind of a case by case basis, though, on what particular issue, you're.
And Barbara, a subsequent statute would replace the existing statute. It would replace
the one to another.
Yeah,
I mean, 718 does apply to your
your
condominium.
There's a specific issue involved, and the specific issue is that our documents, as written, state that the notice of the annual meeting will be 30 days before the annual meeting, and of course, with the mail and sending out the annual notice, letters of a notice of intent to run, all of that, 30 days is an extremely short time frame. And so, whereas 718 says 60 days.
Yeah, well, all that, okay, that will supersede your documents, okay? I mean, basically, there is an opt-out provision. Don't know if you guys ever did that, but basically, the election procedure, the annual meeting procedure, that will supersede. So, assuming you're talking about an annual meeting where you're having an election, the first
Correct.
notice must be 60 days in advance by law, and then people get a chance to submit their names. They have to submit their names not less than 40 days before the election date,
Right.
and then they have a chance to submit their information sheet. Some people call it a resume, but
Right.
it's the information sheet. That's 5 more days. That's by the 35th day, and then the actual meeting notice, the second notice with the copy of the ballots and the envelopes and all that stuff. That's not less than 14 days before the annual meeting. All that's by statute. It can't go out actually, less than 35 days, because that's when people have a chance to submit their information sheets. So generally speaking, the statutory, that's a procedural issue, and generally speaking, every condominium has to comply with with that.
Okay. Okay. So basically, when it comes to, and this is about the election, the notice of the annual meeting, the election, all of that stuff, then 718 takes precedence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yes.
Those are my questions.
Well,
And
those are good questions, and appreciate it. And like I said, I'll get back with you, Barbara, on some of the language out of the statute for investments. I think it's in the administrative code. I was trying to find it this morning and I couldn't find it, but I think the language, there's language there relative to the administrative code, but I'm not positive, and I'll take a look at that and see what I can find.
Administrative code of what?
The Florida Administrative Code, which basically the rules that are set down by the division interpreting or clarifying how the state will interprets or handles certain aspects of the statute. So the legislature passes the law 718. Then within 718, there's a within 718, then there's a those may not always be clear. And under the Condo Act, the division has the ability to write rules that clarify or interpret the statute and how it will be applied.
Or supplement the statute, basically. So the state will allow the division to adopt rules for certain things to supplement what's in the statute. Like for example, with the election procedure, the statute sets forth the basic procedure, but then the division sets forth more specific details regarding the election procedure. That's just one example. Same thing with reserves. The statute sets forth basics about reserves, but the division then adopts more regulations regarding reserves and disclosures and what must be in the budget and things like that, in more detail than what's in the statute. So one complements the other.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. And that division is called what?
Well, I don't know who's doing is that done through the division, Mark? All the stuff about the
yeah.
Is that done through
it's done through the division. Okay. Yeah, all that stuff comes through the division of timeshares. Goes through the division of timeshares, condominiums, and all homeowners or whatever.
Yeah.
So the
division of Florida condominiums, timeshares, and mobile homes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then I just found this other question. Is it appropriate for the CAM to also be on the board?
It's unusual. And you got to be careful with that. Can't be being paid as a board member, So.
Yeah, but if, depending upon what your documents say, whether they allow board members to be require board members to be unit owners or not, but if the person is a unit owner, or if they're not a unit owner and your documents allow for for the election of non-owners to the board, then that would be legitimate. It's not, like Peter said, you're running a little bit of a risk, because if that person's being paid to be the property manager, then you get into the question of whether or not their duties include attendance at board meetings. And therefore, if they're a board member, they wouldn't normally be compensated for that. But as a property manager, they're going to be compensated for attendance at the board meetings. And so now all of a sudden, you may have a violation of the statute in terms of somebody being paid. So it's a touchy.
They're both unit owners, and they're both licensed cams. They're both paid.
No, paid by the association or paid by other people or paid by your association?
They're paid by the association.
Yeah.
That's one you got to be careful on. I don't know. I would shy away from it, but
yeah, it's whether or not it's legal or not is probably iffy. I mean, it probably may technically be legal, but you'd have to be really tight in terms of how your contract with them is written, what their responsibilities are under their contract, make sure that there's no overlap on that contract between what a board member's responsibility would be, because if they're being paid to be a board member, that's in violation of the statute. So, I would be real careful with that. As a CAM, I would be very leery to accept a position like that. I would not accept that. I would potentially accept an officer position if necessary. Sometimes they'll appoint. I wouldn't like it.
You can't pay officers either. So
no, I know, but I'm just saying there might be something there that you're an assistant treasurer or something for a period of time. But even there, you're getting into a real gray area that is pretty shallow. So it's not somewhere I'd want to go necessarily.
Yeah. One is the president and the other one's the treasurer.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. It's just, well, you know what? I've said it before. I'll say it again.
Ask for an opinion about that too.
Yeah, I would too. But I said it before. I'll say it again that I don't care what these guys. I know these guys are probably trying to do what they think is best for the association. Mm-hmm. They are going to get hammered. These are the kind of situations that I always talk about. The no good deed goes unpunished. They're sure that what they're doing is the best thing for the associations, keeping down the assessments. They're doing a great job for all of that, making sure that none of that happens. And when you're the president and the treasurer and you're controlling all the shots and you're basically controlling everything that's happening and you're the property manager, that's doomed for a failure. That's legal. And when I talk about these, I'm not talking about just people disliking you. I'm talking about charges of fraud and people going to jail because that's what happens, because stuff doesn't get done the way it should, because there's no checks and balances. There's no internal control. And the next thing you know, somebody just made an honest mistake, but it isn't an honest mistake when you've set yourself up like that. You can't argue an honest mistake when you put yourself in that kind of position. That ceases to be an honest mistake. So anyway, I just feel sorry for those people because they're going to be, that's a tough situation. Anyway.
I know. All right, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Barbara. Appreciate the call. All right. John, thanks for holding. You've been waiting for a minute, so go ahead. Are you there?
Good morning. The administrative code, better known as the administrative state.
Yeah. Yeah, so to speak.
Go to argue.
Yeah, that's
I always love it because there's this, over the years I've just seen so much, this is written, but this can be interpreted this way, that way, and every other way. But the reason for my call is I'm still learning about community development districts. And I understand from the ballot that just went out that a couple of seats that were up the Board of Supervisors is what you would call the administrators for the CDD are up for election, 2 seats, and they got to get on the ballot with the presidents. And I was kind of surprised, and then I realized, well, I guess it's quasi-government. And then I also learned that there's a section, just like 718, for condominiums. You have, I believe it's 790 or is it 190, but it's a section in the statute that governs CDDs. And my question today is, Do you know who oversees that? I mean, for instance, if you have a condo or HOA problem, you call the Department of Business Professional Regulation, and they have a division, and then they have a compliance department, and so on. But who oversees community district developments, if you happen to know that answer?
I believe that they are. I believe that at the state level, well, I think they come under a couple different things. For one thing, they have to work within the individual county codes and governments. They're outside of that, but technically they're a function of the county government, I believe. And then I'm not sure who provides the ultimate who provides the ultimate supervision over those. I don't think it's the legislature, but it might be. But I think it might be. There's. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not sure who. I was trying to remember.
That's okay. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I'm probably going to start with the county, the local end of it, and work my way up. Hopefully, I don't have to work my way up too far. But I was just surprised that they actually get on the ballot, and then I realized I guess they are quasi-government.
Well, and you know what they do is they've got they are quasi-government, and then they you've got developments of regional impact, and these are the same type of thing. They're and those things are controlled, I believe, administratively at the state level, but I'm not sure specifically on the CDDs.
Yeah, because I'm just trying to find out. Their board meetings or supervisor meetings are not posted, and they're not generally attended by the public because nobody knows when, or the members of the community, because nobody usually knows when they are. And that's why I'm trying to find out who has jurisdiction over them. Also, there's, usually you have a CDD to put in the infrastructure, including roads, sidewalks, lights, sewer, storm drain, so on. But now I find out that the POA, Property Owners Association, because we have commercial tracks included, are, I guess, they voted a couple of years ago to maintain the sidewalks. And I'm like, what in the world would they want to do that for? Why would they want to take on a liability for a deeded property that's deeded to the CDD and not the property owners yet? I mean, eventually, when the bonds come pay, they'll be turned over to the POA, but we don't own that property. We don't own the sidewalks yet, so why are we taking care of them?
That's pretty common, though, on a development in negotiations, CDDs or not. More and more of the municipalities require that the associations take over that responsibility. That's why there's so many HOAs in Florida. That's why almost nothing gets built nowadays without being part of an HOA, because of the fact that the counties, in particular, cities in some cases, but the counties are trying to push that responsibility, their responsibility for roads, sewers, underground, and those kind of things, sidewalks, all to the association, and make them maintain them, so that they don't have to maintain anything inside of an association. And that is, John, that's pretty common. I mean, I'm seeing that all the time.
Let's make a distinction, though. You said HOAs. In a normal HOA, yeah, the sidewalks would be part of the HOA, but this property I'm talking about is deeded. I mean, if you look at the plat, it's deeded to the Community Development District. It's not deeded to the Property Owners Association. So there's a liability question there.
No, if you look at, and that I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying is, in many HOAs, particularly some of the older HOAs, the roads are county roads and the sidewalks are county sidewalks. They're deeded to the county, but they still make the associations pay for them. In other words, they make the maintenance of those. They enter into a maintenance agreement, a long-term maintenance agreement with the, so it doesn't make a difference who owns it. They push the responsibility for maintenance onto the association. And that's pretty common. And then you're right, the liability does to some degree go with it, if they don't maintain them correctly.
Well, the county, if the county wants to put in sidewalks and roads, we take tax dollars every year. So that's extortion to push it on some homeowners association. Now, if it's a gated community, if it's a private road, that's a whole different matter. But if it's a pass through, there's no reason for the county to force any of these responsibilities upon a homeowners association. That's ridiculous.
Here's the
Not a
other.
gated community.
Here's the other side of that. That means if you don't do that, that means that anyone anywhere can have access to your community, whether it's gated or not, because that's my sidewalk and that's my road. So you can't keep me off of it. So therefore, you
That's why in gated communities, homeowners associations take that responsibility. I understand what you're saying.
yeah, and that's why they push the maintenance there and all that kind of stuff, is because they want to keep, it allows the association to have more control over their property ultimately, or over their community, not necessarily their property, but their community. And I don't know. I mean, I think it's intrusive. I think it's, and then you get into the counties dictating what, that the sidewalks have to be pink or whatever the deal is, so, it does, it puts liability potentially on them and other things. If they don't maintain it correctly and somebody trips and falls, you've got all kinds of issues.
That's why you don't even want to go there. And, the thing about the CDD community is you pay in non-ad valorem taxes each year, a large fee to the CDD to help pay off the bond service, and half of that goes, or even more than half of that goes towards maintenance of the infrastructure. So why in the world would a POA that I'm paying a different assessment for want to include sidewalks when I'm already paying for maintenance through the CDD? It's nonsensical.
Well, presumably, if they don't have that cost, you're not paying for it. I mean, if they push that cost off, they should have also taken it out of their budget. So you should.
No, that's not going to happen. It's like Washington D.C. Once it's in the budget, it ain't coming out.
Well, I know, but technically that's what would happen. And if it doesn't come out, you elect people to the to the CDD board, and they and make them change it. But I understand what you're saying, and I think it's I prefer personally. I prefer the more I have control over what I'm doing at the homeowner level, the more I like it. The less somebody else is telling me what to do. So if I've got responsibility for maintenance and I can maintain it when I want to maintain it, in other words, I can keep it at the level I want. I can, my community, we can maintain. We don't have to worry about sidewalks cracking, roads falling apart, and all those kind of things. And I can take care of that. I would rather do that rather than wait for some board to decide that it's now our turn. And that's just my opinion on it. But I can understand, from a county standpoint, they push that on to the associations because they just don't want to have to deal with all of the individual issues that come up inside the homeowners association, and whose responsibility it is to fix something. But that's the way it is. I know, there's the pros and cons.
Getting back to the original question, are you involved with certain properties that have CDDs? And if you are, do those CDD meetings of the CDD, usually it's quarterly, are they posted?
I am not involved with any at this point. I was involved with, I did some consulting work with a friend on one, with another CPA on one. But I haven't done anything on them in a while. In fact, I haven't done any research on them in a while.
They're not really that prevalent on the East Coast. They're more in the Tampa, I guess, Orlando area. Most of the CDDs in Florida, to my understanding. Yeah, bigger communities sometimes, and that are not already developed. Over on the West Coast and around Orlando, you still have a lot of large farms up there. I mean, large ranches that are acres and acres. That once those are turned over for development, they span multiple counties, and that's when you usually see these CDDs. But in general, the CDD, as you pointed out, falls more like a quasi-governmental agency, and therefore they have sunshine issues, which are a little more strict than the normal issues you would have with an HOA. So, so typically, yes, elections and all those meetings and everything have to be
have to be noticed. And typically, I think that's consistent with the Sunshine Law.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thanks again for your time.
No problem, Jonathan.
Great show. Take care.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. I appreciate the call. Yeah, that's those for those that maybe had not caught one of our previous shows. CDDs or community development districts, and they're a thing that's developed out of the law in the last few years. Well, it's been there for a while. It's been becoming more prevalent, as John pointed out. Over on the West Coast, there's a couple really large developments that are, and up by Orlando, a couple large developments that have been done in this manner. What they do is they allow you to kind of put together your own quasi-municipal entity, because you're spanning multiple counties, instead of having a situation where, is it the Martin County Police or the Martin County Sheriff or the St. Lucie County Sheriff or whatever, you get into these districts provide some of their own infrastructure, their drainage, some of their own water retention issues, of course, in accordance with law, and then, safety, security, they can have their own security force and all of that kind of thing. So, and then their costs become part of your tax bill rather than becoming an an association dues. Although you, as John pointed out, still have association dues. So it can be, you have to be careful because it can cost-wise, it can be very burdensome. But otherwise, it's it's pretty, it's to allow things to be better administratively, so that you don't have so many agencies that you have to deal with when you're trying to get a problem resolved. But anyway, so that's the CDD issue, and appreciate that call. And Peter, on this thing with getting back to, because we've got a little bit of time left here, the the thing with the property manager and board members, and you want to just recap a little bit about some of the things that people need to consider. Like, I'm sure a lot of people, don't realize that you don't necessarily have to be a unit owner to be a board member, unless your documents, require that. So,
well, okay, just to strictly talk about eligibility without getting into
right
too much the manager thing. Contrary to popular belief, there is no requirement under the law, either in Chapter 718 or Chapter 720, that board members must be owners or must be members of the association. Basically, owners or members of the association are all eligible to be on the board, but even then, there are certain things that will disqualify them. If you're more than 90 days delinquent, if you're a convicted felon, if you've been suspended by the division, things like that. If you've been charged with embezzlement or stealing from the association, not convicted, just indicted or charged, arrested, until those are dismissed. Now, your documents can, and many do, but not all, limit board members to being owners or being members of the association. So in that instance, then they are limited. But you just, again, you can't assume. You have to look at your documents, look at the articles, look at the bylaws. And even then, the other thing to be careful about is sometimes there are conflicts. And this is one issue where I probably see the most conflicts. Sometimes there's conflicts between the articles of incorporation and the bylaws regarding who is eligible. The articles will say you don't have to be a member or an owner, and the bylaws say you do. Well, in that case, the articles would control. So you do have to be, again, first thing, you just can't assume that everyone has to be on an owner. And then secondly, you got to look at all your documents just to make sure that there isn't any conflict. Even if there is a conflict, you have to read carefully and see whether it's a direct conflict, or can you read the documents together somehow. So I'm not saying that this takes 16 days to do the research, but you do have to just kind of go through the steps to figure out who is eligible and who is not eligible to run and serve on the board.
Did relative to that, one question I did have is, an association can be self-managed. So what
Yes.
are the requirements? So let's say the board decides to be self-managed. Can they then appoint somebody to be the property manager? And if so, can they pay them?
If you're paying, if you have more than, what is it now, X amount of units, and just going on my head, or if you have a budget of over $100,000 and you're paying someone, then that person must be licensed. Okay.
Okay. So even though they're a board member or whatever,
usually when I see self-manage, I mean self-manage would be the board is managing the association. Okay. If you have a property manager and you're paying them, okay, then that's not self-managed. That now is, that person needs to be, generally speaking, unless you're very, very small or have a very small budget, that person needs to be a licensed property manager.
okay.
So, when I refer to self-manage, or when I say self-manage, generally that means that you don't have professional management. Okay. The board is managing the community. The board's not paying itself, obviously, to do that. So that's how I always interpret self-management.
Okay. So once you get to the point that the board is not just voluntarily handling the activities, but rather is paying somebody, then at that point it ceases to be self-managed.
Right.
And everybody has to be licensed at that point.
Unless you're a very small association.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, or a small budget.
Yeah, that's what, I know that's confusing from time to time, because somebody, and the other thing is that you can't give a board member a discount on their dues because they're doing extra work, or
no,
all of those kind of things. No, there's no way to provide them with health insurance or whatever. You can't do all that stuff. You just can't. So anyway, well, we're out of time this morning, but appreciate the calls and the questions. Appreciate the people listening, and hopefully if you enjoy the show, you'll let your friends know, and if you don't, just keep your mouth shut. But anyway, we appreciate you joining us here on Columbus Day, and thanks for joining us right here on the WSTU. We're digital. We don't care anymore, but we are digital, and we happen to be in Jensen Beach, Indiantown, I don't know, sometimes Port St. Lucie, sometimes DeQuesta, but most of this area we cover right here on WSTU, your very, very, very old station.